now look at Gartley trading method automation. In this session, we're going to consider two automated methods to help us define Gartley patterns. The first tool is going to be called the Gartley Pattern Identifier. This is a tool that's part of the BEX toolkit within Market Analyst. In addition, we'll be considering the Gartley Pattern Scanner, and that's in the BEX toolkit as well. The Gartley Pattern Identifier is available for us to find trend continuation Gartleys and trend reversal Gartleys on our existing charts. So you can visually find them on historical data, and as new bars are added to the chart, they will pop up and become visible. In addition, the Gartley Pattern Identifier will allow us to see Gartley patterns on intraday data. Now, besides the Gartley Pattern Identifier, we also have our second tool, which is the Gartley Pattern Scanner. Now, the scanner is only able to scan daily, weekly, monthly data. We won't be able to scan intraday data. And we'll only be able to scan for trend continuation Gartleys. The scanner won't look for the WX leg. One of the differences between the scanner and the identifier is the identifier will find the WX leg for us. But before we get into the geekiness of finding Gartley patterns with a computer, I have to remind you that there is no computer on the planet that compares to the one between your ears to find Gartley patterns. So if this whole idea of finding patterns with a computer doesn't interest you, that's fine. Don't bother watching the session, because I've already given you the tools to find these patterns manually. Use the computer between your ears. However, for those of you that are interested in Gartley pattern automation, I have designed some tools to help you to find Gartley patterns, and this is especially useful if you have a whole bunch of data that you need to plow through to find some patterns instead of trying to find them manually. So let's get into it, and let's first consider the Gartley Pattern Identifier. Okay, so here we are at the home page of Market Analyst. What I'll do is open up this workbook of mine entitled S&P 500, and I'll show you how to use the Gartley Pattern Identifier. Okay, so here's my daily chart of 3M. I'm just going to open this up, and what we're going to do is first of all, I don't know if you remember us talking about the percent swing overlay, but this is where that information comes in handy. What I'm going to do is open up the percent swing overlay. I got it on my toolbar here. I'll just click that and drop it on here. I'll get rid of the volume here too. Okay, so I've applied the percent swing chart overlay. Let's just look at the properties of that overlay over here under the control panel. Let's highlight the swings, and then if you look over here, it says bars 3% 5. So as we discussed before, with the percent swing chart overlay, the market has to reverse at least 5% of this low price before it starts to register a new line. The Gartley Pattern Identifier, what it does, it will be using this method of identifying the patterns. Okay, so for an example, it could look at this here and say, oh, here's a trend move followed by a counter trend move, and it's going to look at the ratios of this pattern based on this low, this high, this low, this high, and just ignore all the data in between. So this is a 5% swing chart overlay. We can change this to 3, okay, and then the swings, there's more of them at 3. We'll go back to 5. Okay, there you go. Now what I'm going to do is turn off the percent swing overlay. I'll click the I here so you can't see it anymore. But now I'm going to add the Gartley Pattern Identifier. And to do that, you go to Tools, Beck, and go over to Gartley Pattern Identifier. And just click anywhere on the chart, and you'll see it's not showing us any patterns here, but we can tell from the structure panel that on this layer I do have the Gartley Pattern Identifier on the chart. So if I just left click this, and then go over here and open up the control panel, I now have the properties for my Gartley pattern identifier over here. Now, remember the percent swing chart overlay? The settings we'll set them to the same as the Gartley pattern identifier. We have 5% and 3 bars on that. So turn that off. We'll go back here. And then we go down here to percent swing. Okay, so we hit that, and you notice that there's 2 settings. One is for the reference swing, and one is for the primary swing. So the reference swing is in reference to the XA leg. Now, the XA leg is bigger than the other legs in the Gartley pattern, so that's why we have a different swing setting for the XA leg. That number should be bigger because, let's say for an example, let's see if I can find one here. Okay, let's just for fun, let's call this one up here. Okay, so we could be looking at this, and we think that looks like an impulse, and that looks like a correction. Now let's turn on the percent swing overlay, and at 5%, we're getting in this XA leg, we're getting a whole bunch of choppiness within this leg, right? Now, if we make this percentage higher, like 10%, then you can see it gets rid of the noise in that XA leg. Or if we go to 15%, it's just from the low to the high, and then we get this symmetry, the AB equals CD type of action like that. So the 2 settings on the Gartley pattern identifier, when you look under percent swing, reference, we want to make sure that this number's higher, because on the XA leg, we don't want it to, well, choose maybe this low or this low when we're looking for a pattern. We want it to ignore all the noise within that leg, so that's why this number is set to a higher value. This primary swing percentage, this lower number, that is to be used to help us identify the AB equals CD portion of the structure that we're looking for. And that number can be lower, it can be more sensitive to the corrective nature of the swings of the ABCD section of the pattern. So if you want to keep it real simple out of the gate, this is what I'd suggest to you. Simply copy what I'm doing here with equities, and this will be your starting point. So under properties, make sure once you've applied the Gartley pattern identifier, just left click it over here in the structure panel, go over to the control panel, go under properties, make sure the bars are set to 3, and under percent swing, put reference at 5 and put primary at 3. And that's a good place to start. And you might look at this and say, that's really subjective. I thought this automation here is really going to help us speed things up. Well, yes and no, because at this point, look at how many zeros there are behind this 3 here. I can put any number that I want, 3.5%, 3.75, 4.15. I can put any number there, and then I can put any number here under reference swings. And next thing you know, you get into that paralysis of analysis where you never trade and you're trying to guess the right numbers for these Gartley patterns. And like I said, your gray matter between your ears is always going to be better. So if you're looking for the geeky ultimate holy grail way of finding Gartley patterns, you know what? I've spent well over a decade fooling around with software, wasting a whole bunch of time. Yes, it's still going to be relatively subjective even when it comes down to this computer technology that we have. Like I say, this is a starting point, and each particular product, whether it be Forex or stocks within the S&P 500 or stocks within the Dow 30, each product has a different personality. It requires different parameters for the reference swing and the primary swing. One of the best ways to figure out which swings are the best is to just visually look at it. Put that percent swing overlay on the chart and just look and see which numbers hit most of the swings. That's one of the best ways to find Gartley patterns on a particular product, is to apply the percent swing overlay to a chart, visually see what settings, what numbers, what percentages hit most of the swings that you're looking for, also based on the time frame that you're trying to trade. Remember, this Gartley pattern identifier can be used on intraday data as well, so then you're going to have to change the numbers when you get to a shorter time frame as well. So let's go back here to the properties. We got bars 3. We can choose how we want the bullish and bearish patterns to show up. You'll see what they look like here in a minute. Okay, let's go down here to range. You can base the Gartley pattern on the high versus the low, or you can do it on the close. We're only interested in the highs and lows, so put that there. Show boxes. You'll see that there in a minute. Patterns. You can choose bullish, bearish, or both. We'll have it set to both. Pattern calculation, you can choose exact or high to low. Now, if I hit this high to low, it's going to show you all kinds of things on the chart. So I'm going to do it here, high to low. Okay, now they're all over the place, right? And when we have it set to high to low, it's going to find all the different patterns, and the criteria is not very stringent. We're finding 786 Gartley, trend continuation, and it doesn't matter. They're not looking for trend continuation or trend reversal at this point. It could be either or. Here's a nice one. Trend, counter trend, hit 786, comes down nicely. But it's going to find all kinds of them. It's finding a 786. Here's one at 38.2. And so you can see the red box that says show boxes. We can, if you want to turn that off, show boxes, then you only have the lines showing you the pattern. And then we have the retracement levels displayed as the pattern completes. Now, like I mentioned, you might look at this and say the structure isn't very good on these patterns, and you are correct. It's not. It's almost like a catch-all. Here's one at 48.6. Trend, counter trend. The AB equals CD doesn't look that great. I don't use this setting. I'll show you which setting. Here's a 100% retracement down to here, double bottom. What I like to use is the exact setting. So let's go back here. Left click it on the structure panel, come over here, and what we're going to do is choose pattern calculation. We're going to change that to exact. Now when you choose exact, you have a number of different settings based on the individual legs of the pattern. So the first one is AB to XA. You now know the labels, so that will make sense to you. And some people, I don't know if you remember me talking about this, but some people get really analytical when it comes to looking for Gartley patterns, and they want every leg of the Gartley pattern to hit a Fibonacci ratio. And I find that that has made the Gartley pattern too complicated, where if you're looking for perfection, you'll probably trade once in your lifetime, and even then we don't even know if it's going to work. So what I'm trying to say is that let's not overcomplicate it. I want to go and set my pattern calculation to exact, and I want to go in here and set these settings. The ones I'm going to show you right now, which settings are the most important. Okay, the ones that are not important are the AB to XA leg. The common setting for that is 61.8%. You can plug that number in, but I want you to put the tolerance at 20%, because the higher the tolerance, the less weight this setting has. Okay, so AB to XA, set that to 20 at 61.8. Remember, we looked at the price extension tool. We want AB to equal CD. This is the setting now where you put this number to a low number. I put it at 10%. You can put it even lower depending on how accurate you want the settings. Just a reminder, the lower the number, the less likely you're going to get results bouncing back at you. So don't put the number too low. I set it to 10%. So like I said, take these numbers, use them, and modify them according to your own personal preferences. Okay, so A, B to CD is good. Set that to 10%. AD to XA, once again, this is a very important number. Now, I really like the 78.6% Gartley. I have mine set to 78.6, AD% of XA, and the tolerance, I have it set at 10. That's a lower number, lower than the other settings, so this is a really important part of my Gartley pattern identifier settings. Okay, so A, B to CD is set to 10, AD to XA is set to 10% tolerance, and these last two, it doesn't matter. BC to AB, you can set that to 78.6 and set to 20%. And CD to BC, set that to 127%, set it at 20% tolerance. Those ones you could set to anything you want. It really doesn't matter. The two big ones, like I mentioned, AB to CD and AD to XA. Those are the most important ones. I'll turn show boxes back on here and see if we can find anything. Here's a trend continuation Gartley pattern. You know, overall it failed if you look at this price action, but you would have definitely made money with our risk management rules that we'll be talking about here in the next session. But if you put your stop over here, there's the trend followed by a counter trend. There's 78.6% retracement, went up nicely there. Let's look at another example. Here's Bank of America. Gartley pattern identifier, 3 bars, trend, counter trend, hits the 78.6%, pretty much to the tick there. That's pretty solid, and moves up nicely after that. Let's look at another one. Here's a TRG 786. I have the Gartley pattern identifier set over here, and notice it says show TRG setup. So with that checked, it makes sure that there is a WX leg, as you can see there is here, that pops up, and then we get the AB equals CD down to 786, and it nailed it to the tick there before it moves higher. It did come back a little bit before it went up again, but look at this, it didn't take out this low, and using multiple contracts and trailing stops, you would have made some nice money on this trade here. Let's look at another example. Here's a nice little TCG 786. We have a trend followed by a counter trend, hits 786 here and moves up nicely. Let's look at another example. Here's a chart of General Electric, a daily chart. We have our Gartley pattern identifier with 3 bars. And if we scroll through the data here, there's a few different Gartley patterns. Here's a trend continuation Gartley, XA, AB, BC, CD down to 78.6. That would have been good. And we got some more here. Here's a bearish TCG 786 right here to 786, and that comes down. And what else we got? There's another one on here. Okay, yeah, that's nice. Not much of a correction prior to the X point here, but nonetheless, probably a little bit more refined on a intraday chart. But if you zoom in here, 786 pops up. Even though it comes down later, you would have made a little bit of money on this one here. So there's 3 nice ones on GE. Let's look at some more examples. Here's a beautiful TCG 786 on Home Depot. The market comes down. X, A, B, C, D comes down, touches 786, and starts moving higher from here. Really nice. Let's look at another one. Here's a trend continuation Gartley of JP Morgan using the Gartley pattern identifier. Trend, counter trend, 786, boom. Let's look for another one. Here's an example of Oracle on the daily chart here. We got a trend followed by a counter trend, a TCG 786 right there. Boom. Let's look for another one. Here's one on Pepsi. It didn't quite make it, but we got our X point down here. We got a nice move up on the trend continuation. Correction comes down, and we'd have our orders down here if we don't get filled. Oh well, that's trading. Let's look for another one. Here's a daily chart of SanDisk. Look at this. There's the WX, and then the XA, AB, BC, CD. This is a TRG 618, and it moves up nicely from there. Really nice. Let's look for another one. Here's a few on Starbucks. Trend continuation, TCG 786. That was nice. This one here, it turned around and went higher. It doesn't always work, but then we come down. We got another one. Bullish trade set up here. Would have went up, hit our targets, and even though it went down, we would have made money scaling out of the position on this one. So we had a really nice result here, and two that not so good, but once again, that's the reality of trading. Let's look for some more. Here's a TRG 786 on Tyson Foods. Look at this. So going up, WX up to here, decline in volume. We hit the top, and we have a spike in volume. So this would be the distribution phase of the big traders. And then as the pattern starts to play out, we can see a decline in volume, as Gartley says. We get over to here, 786, boom, comes down. Really nice. Let's look for some more. U.S. Bank Corp, USB on the S&P 500, trend, counter trend. TCG 786. Let's look for another one. How about this UPS trade? Look at this one here. UPS, trend, counter trend. TCG 786, boom. Let's look for some more. Here's another one on UPS. This would be a trend continuation, Gartley, based on the fact that this is the trend is down. So trend moved down with the trend here. Counter trend 786 comes down again. Trend, counter trend. Just not much risk on that trade. Well, let's look for another one. Here's a TCG on Disney. Even though it went down and made a new low, we would have made money on this little pop up here with a little bit of risk. Put our stop down here, buy at 786. There's the impulse followed by the correction, and would have been buyer here. Let's look for some more. So here's a chart of Yahoo, the daily chart. To apply the Gartley pattern identifier, there's a couple of ways we can do it. Just to review, I can right-click. I've been using the GPI or Gartley pattern identifier quite a bit. So if I right-click on the chart and hit the wrench and see it's right at the top there, if I simply left-click this right now, boom, there it is on the chart. So it's really easy to use. So that's one that just played out here in Yahoo recently. Trend continuation, trend, counter trend, hit 786, and there we go. Now let's have a look at the Gartley pattern scanner.